Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We'll just give everybody a moment to get in, get their audio set up. We're so glad you're here. I'm just keeping an eye on the waiting room. There we go. Okay. I'll just let everybody keep filtering in, but we'd love to welcome you to, I think, is this our fifth session of this? I've lost track of what number it is. I think our fifth session of the Harnessing the Science of Learning book study. We are so thrilled you're here. We're getting to the end of the book and getting into some of the really interesting content in terms of putting this learning in practice. So I just like to start by acknowledging that ONLit's work takes place on traditional Indigenous territories. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. And we are thankful to be able to work on this land. And we are also thankful to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people for their care for and teachings about the earth. And this acknowledgement reminds us of our responsibilities to our relationships and to the ancestral lands on which we learn, work, and live. So, welcome. You may have noticed that I look a little bit different from your host from previous weeks. Our intrepid leader, Laura Bross, has broken her ankle, unfortunately. She had a hockey adventure that went a little sideways. So I'm filling in for her this evening. But I know that you may see her pop in and out in the chat. I think she said she was maybe planning on, if she could, popping in. So if you see her, send her some good wishes because she is healing up. So that way she can join back again for our final session. So speaking of our schedule, we are in our fifth session. I got it right. And we're going to be digging into implementation this week, focusing on chapter 10 of the book. So really an interesting topic. And then we have one session left. The author of the book will come and join us live. You'll remember we had a recorded message from him when we kicked off the book. So we'll bookend that with Nathaniel Swain joining us for the last session on April 17th. So we are so thrilled to have Scott and Jessica from Evergreen School Division in Manitoba join us, and I will be passing it over to them shortly. You may have heard a little bit about their division's journey as they explore implementing structured literacy and scaling that across the division. So really looking forward to learning more about their work and how that relates to a lot of the important conversations and work that is happening in Ontario. So just a quick outline of what we have planned this evening. I'm just going to chat a little tiny bit about implementation science, something that I personally find really interesting. I will throw it over to Scott and Jess. And this is something where we're really hoping that we can have, a nice conversation around this. Happy to keep asking them questions that pop up. So as we're all chatting, feel free to keep the chat active and happy for it to be interactive and chatty as we all sort of move through this content together. And then we'll wrap up. I'll highlight some interesting resources you might find interesting, and we'll say goodnight. So I did just want to spend a few moments looking at implementation science specifically. And I just wanted to start by highlighting this is a graphic that I first saw in one of Tiffany Hogan's presentations on implementation science. And I think it really is relevant. I think about a lot of sort of the conversations around what are evidence-based practice and what are these, innovations and changes we should be making in schools, and just recognizing that the school or the board or the district or division ecosystems are incredibly complex, right? It is really, really, really challenging to think about taking something that we know from research and scaling that over a system and making that change sustainable, all obviously in the service of supporting our students. So I thought it would be an interesting thing to kick off with this picture. And then I'm also reminded of the quote that the author highlights in the book, really unpacking that the value of some idea or some shift or some change, it sort of lives or dies by what happens day to day within schools, right? So thinking about we really do need to be considering implementation and sort of how this rolls out within systems. And something that I wasn't necessarily quite as aware of until I really dug into this a few years ago was that there is an entire field of research called implementation science that specifically it's interdisciplinary. So it looks not just at, making shifts and changes in education, but other fields, including healthcare. But thinking about how can we take this new idea, this innovation, and implement it and scale it across systems to allow it to, meet its intended effect. So what I just have here, we'll chat about Dr. Swain's 4E implementation framework, but I did just want to highlight the active implementation formula, which I find to be a really interesting way of contextualizing the importance of thinking about implementation. So effective practices certainly are a really important part of our conversation, and that tends to be something as structured literacy people, we talk a lot about, what are evidence-based literacy practices? But these go hand in hand thinking about effective implementation, right? How are these implemented across the system? And what are the structures in that context that allow that to happen? And you'll notice that it's sort of this multiplicative relationship, kind of like the simple view of reading, that shows it's not just we need all of these to reach that element of socially significant outcomes. And thinking within the education context, we're thinking about meaningful impacts on student reading and writing. So again, thinking about where this implementation fits. And, within the book, Swain really highlights that 4E implementation model, which I'm looking forward to digging into more, I guess a fifth E, right? 4E and Evergreen, fifth E, but I'm really looking forward to digging into that in terms of how those shifts are made over time and what those phases look like as we move towards making changes. One highlight that I did just want to briefly touch on before I throw it over to Scott and Jessica really was around de-implementation. I found that part of the chapter to be really interesting, thinking about not necessarily just layering in additional things we need to do and additional, things we want to add, but also thinking about what, if any, what elements do we need to de-implement and highlighting, we might want to consider these for practices or practices that might not be evidence-based, that, there might be something more effective for them or more cost-effective, or things that we know really, could be potentially damaging. So really thinking about not only just making shifts and adding additional pieces, but what, if anything, needs to be removed. And one thing I was reflecting on that I'm a little horrified that I'm going to show you this, but I thought about this as a metaphor. I volunteer for IDA Ontario, and we have a storage locker that we use to keep all of our physical stuff. We don't have a physical office, so we do have a storage locker. And I can tell you, with many, many years of this organization, we keep trying new projects, new initiatives. Our conference grows in scale. And over time, I can tell you that our storage locker ended up looking like this, which I'm a little horrified that I am showing everybody on a webinar that is recorded and will live on YouTube. But I think it's a really powerful metaphor of thinking about, like, oh my gosh, we grew as an organization, we did new things, we explored. We got to the point where you could not go into looks like most teachers' basements, says Pam. Yeah, you couldn't actually go inside of it. You had to take things out before you could even walk in. So it really wasn't sustainable and usable. But thinking about what we know about de-implementation, there are options for that, right? In terms of discontinuing something full stop, replacing something, reducing its usage, or restricting it to certain contexts. And there is a happy ending to this story because some of our board members they did some lovely work. And now, like, you can walk in, right? Like, there's leftover conference bags and there's the baskets we use for the silent auction. It's much more usable. So I hope that metaphor was worth. I need to clean. Good luck cleaning your basement. I'm just keeping an eye on it. I know it's a lot. I hope this picture motivates. It is worth it. It is worth it. So with that mortifying example in and recorded, I will pass that over to Scott and Jeff. I hope that is visible, and I see that the chat is popping, so please keep this coming. Happy to hear all of your thoughts, and I'll make sure to feed them to Scott and Jessica. So with that, take it away, and if you need me to advance a slide, just boss me around.
Okay.
Advance the slide.
I can do that. There we go.
Hi, everyone. First, let me say it's a pleasure to have been invited. The Nathaniel Swain book is one of a suite of books that we've kind of begun to affiliate with as we work on our journey in Evergreen School Division around science of learning. Mostly for us, it started with structured literacy, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. And I should say at the outset that Evergreen School Division resides on Treaty 1 and Treaty 2 territories and the homeland of the Red River Métis. So we're coming to you from Manitoba. Our school division, well, first I'll say I'm Scott Hill. I'm the superintendent and CEO of Evergreen School Division. That picture that you shared, Una, at the outset with all the squiggly lines to indicate that it's not a straight line from A to B. This is going to be very evident to people tonight, not just in our story, but in our presentation. So bear with us. I hope that the messiness is okay. It's probably going to be a little bit different than some of the slick, polished presentations that may have preceded us. So I'll just turn it over to Jess to introduce herself too.
I'm Jessica Warden. I'm the learning coordinator for Evergreen School Division. So I supervise and direct the curriculum side of things and the student services side of things. So working with both consultants and clinicians.
So I've been in my role as superintendent in Evergreen for a little over 2 years now, and was assistant superintendent before that. And so some of the story that you hear tonight in our journey precedes my becoming superintendent and was part of the kind of planning and talking and thinking that Jessica and I did together, along with others prior to my becoming superintendent. But I should give some credit too for those that came before me, including our former superintendent, Rosa Gray, and our board. I'm really lucky. I work for a school board that's incredibly supportive and really wants to make sure that every decision we make is in the best interest of kids and student learning. So I'll say that at the outset too. So a few pieces of context we wanted to kind of get out of the way. One is that our school division is really, I think in keeping with what you hear about direct and explicit instruction and evidence-based instruction, we're bite-sized. So Evergreen is, by that, I guess I mean small. So our school division is only 8 schools and fewer than 1,500 total kids. So I hope that doesn't, discount our story because of our size. What I think it actually tells us in some ways is, system change. Maybe this is intuitive. System change is possible when you're in a place that is of a size where you can kind of know everyone and make course corrections. We think of ourselves as much more nimble than larger systems. So I credit, our size with a lot of our ability to achieve what I think we're achieving. The other thing, if it sounds like if we present in a way where it sounds, there's not very much risk of this, by the way. If it sounds like it's all neat and tidy and just all works out with a nice bow on it, that we would be lying if that was true. There's lots of loose ends and yucky bits still as we work through all of this, of course. So, but yeah, I wanted to say a little bit about Evergreen School Division being the size that we are, because I think it really has an impact on what we've been working on and the way we work on it. The other thing I'll say is, and I don't know how many Manitobans would be in the group online right now, but Manitoba is a kind of a different context. Our province, I think, really has a different history in terms of the relationships between, government, teachers union, school divisions, the School Boards Association, and our Department of Education is one that has, what did I say? There's a lot of autonomy in Manitoba, and we don't really have embedded a lot of an accountability regime, for better and or worse. And what comes along with that is a lot of kind of freedom for individual school divisions to try new and different things. In our case, that's worked to our advantage in the sense that we went out somewhat alone. I think there aren't very many other school divisions in our province that have worked on structured literacy. There are a couple others that we're happy to have join us, but it's not the orthodoxy of our province by any stretch of the imagination. And so that's I think I'm saying a couple things at the same time, is that we have kind of stuck our neck out a little bit in Manitoba, but at the same time, this is not a place where there's like this kind of heated conversation about whether the kids learning what they're supposed to learn, and there's not like this combative relationship between partners. It just isn't like that. So much so that when I think about the book and similar books that are written about the science of learning, it takes for granted that everyone really cares about learning. And maybe that sounds like a weird thing to say, but sometimes I'm not like, it's hard to really um, be sure that what's expected of all our schools is in fact learning. So I don't know to what extent we're in Manitoba different than others in that, but it's true. I mean, I think we have work to do just to make sure that people continue to care about whether there are in fact learning outcomes realized for kids. So yeah, I'll say those things at the outset, and maybe, I don't know, Jess, if you want to join in on that, or if that's covers it in a rambling way enough.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Okay, you could advance the slide then, I think. Okay, so and then I'm gonna go over here and advance mine so I see the notes. So yeah, these are our intentions tonight, to share our story of implementation so far around structured literacy, around explicit and direct instruction. What we did was kind of reconcile our experience with the chapter, because of course we didn't have the chapter in front of us while we were, minding our way through all of this, like looking at the 4E model and plotting our next move, right? The reality of schools and our work is you're kind of scrambling together the best you can do it at any time. But we've now kind of looked back on it, and it's been a great opportunity to think about it through this lens. So we'll talk about it a bit through this lens. We want to answer questions and share some other reflections. And as much as possible, if it can be kind of a dialogue, and Una is going to help by chiming in and asking questions. And so, yeah, and so there you go. That's what we intend to do. And I think Jess and I have set this up a little bit, so I hope this doesn't come across really weird, but it might look a bit like a conversation between the two of us also, as we kind of try to remember the different parts of our journey. And so I hope it's helpful. We've tried to also think of our story in a similar way, with kind of similar questions as the story examples that are in the chapter. And so I don't know, I hope that helps. So yeah, I think we can proceed from there. Okay. Shall I go, Jess, for this?
Keep
Here's
going. You're
where our
doing great.
What's that? Yeah, okay. Here's where our story starts. For at least for me, I mean, you know how you get these novels that are presented from multiple points of view? I always think about that when I talk about this kind of thing, because it's like, well, this is how I think it started, but it started in different ways, I'm sure, for different people. But so I remember standing in our boardroom one day, just like Jess and I having one of our kind of planning conversations, impromptu, in the middle of a day where we happened to be in the same place at the same time for more than 5 minutes. And I wasn't the superintendent yet. I was assistant superintendent, and I have a high school background. So I had pretty minimal knowledge and understanding of, you know, a lot of things related to early years learning, for sure. But Jess said to me, Jess said to me something to the effect that, did you know that we're telling people that sounding out words is a bad strategy? And I was just like, we're saying what? Like, I didn't understand this, because I was completely naive to what balanced literacy is versus what science of reading is versus what, I didn't really know very much about this. But I found it very weird that that was true. I didn't understand how sounding out words could be a bad strategy. I thought maybe she was fibbing or exaggerating. And I didn't get it. So yeah, and I don't know how much people care if this is specifically about reading or not, but I just I didn't know there was a different actual way to think about it. I was like, I've said this before, it's like the letters go from the left to the right, and the letters represent sounds. Like I don't, you sound them out as you see them, don't you? I was very confused. And so once she said that, I think, and I don't know, this is another way to think of the story, but I think Jess had me kind of on board with the mission that she was on to make sure that we had a very close look at how we were teaching reading um, in our school. So yeah, so there you go. That's how it started. So check, she got me on board, and I was very interested based
I,
on that revelation.
I think from my perspective, the story starts because I was in my first year on the job and I didn't really know what my job was. And so I naively just started asking a bunch of questions like um and also because I'm not an early years teacher, I was a high school math teacher and then went into special education. And I just started asking questions like, we have intervention teachers, what do they do? And and then you get various answers. Like some people say, well, I do the I do the uh what is it? Barton reading.
Yep, that could be it.
Yeah. And then somebody else would say, I do the rhyme magic. And I do something kind of like reading recovery, like I was reading recovery trained, so I do some of that stuff. And it's like, well, why, like you ask people questions like, well, why did you choose that? Like, what's the reason? And it's kind of like, well, that was the thing that was on the shelf when I got the job. So, so we were asking lots of questions that year. How do we teach reading? What assessments do we use? The clinicians were asking me, what would you like us to require prior to doing a psych assessment or a language assessment or a literacy assessment? And I didn't know the answers, so I felt some responsibility as their supervisor to figure that out. And yeah, so I just started talking to anybody that I could, and I found out what we were doing. And then I would go home in the evenings and the weekends and try to read books and listen to podcasts and YouTube videos and everything kind of pointed to the same things over and over and over. And it was phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension, and I'm missing one, which is it, Una?
Vocabulary.
Thank you. Yeah.
Got it. You're just checking to make sure I was paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you hear the stories from people working in schools, and then you try to reconcile that with the research, and there's a big mismatch. And so a big question mark kind of comes up, like, what are we gonna do about this? And so we started trying to figure out what we're gonna do about this. And I think that's kind of where our implementation story starts.
Did you know when you asked Scott or when you told him we say that sounding out words is a bad strategy, that that would be the thing that would get everything rolling?
I don't think it was one thing that got it rolling, but like for Scott, that's the one thing that's something that started him like really thinking like I thought early years was good to go. I thought you were going to come in here and we were going to work on high school.
Mm.
Um so unfortunately for our early years teachers, we didn't come in and just start working on high school. That kind of has come later. But I think with like part of our story is about reading. But I'm guessing, and you can write this in the chat, like once you start learning about reading, you start finding yourself in a network of people who have other things to say about education, and you start learning about direct and explicit instruction. Um, and you start learning about like really high impact teaching strategies. And so some of what we've learned in reading
Right.
has brought us connections to other people and other ways of thinking about math and content area instruction. Um, and and all the way from K to 12. So while um, our reading has mostly focused on word level reading, or did at first, in the K to 3, we've now expanded a whole network of strategies into K to 12 schools.
You're getting some responses to that in the chat. Absolutely, Andrea says, and then just thinking, Lisa brought up that she's been really digging into fluency in math for that same reason.
Mm.
And even I think about parallels. I think about the two previous sessions of this book study. I think we had Jamie Peevler for a literacy focused session and then Robin Cotting for a math one. And I think about how so much of that content really, obviously it's content specific, but really stem from those same principles. I think about how both of them really touched on the instructional hierarchy. Both of them really
Right.
touched on the type of practice we use and what type of practice we use at what point in students' learning and what that looked like in terms of explicit direct instruction and really and absolutely, Leslie, the need for review in all areas, right? Absolutely. I think about how once you sort of explore it in one area, it's really hard to keep that firewall of I'm going to teach reading this way, but we're not going to think about how that generalizes to all the other things we're teaching kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
so true for us. So that while we're kind of speaking in retrospect about some of our reading experience, we've looped back now to the explore, experiment, etc. part of the 4Es around the broader questions around the science of learning. That the book's been very helpful, and and others. We had Zach Groeschel up recently, and he's going to be back, and he met with our principals, last year, and talking about the broader picture is part of what we're doing now too. So yeah. So you could move to the 4E slide next if you want.
I sure can.
For those counting, we're at 5 now. There are 9. So this is where we're at in the presentation, where we got the very fancy graphic. And so of course, as I said, we're going to talk about the model, or we're going to try to use the lens of the model, but we didn't really know the model. But now I can kind of see it. I like how they're like different sized to indicate like the time you spend there, or the amount of activity maybe that it's got to go there too. But yeah, and there's lots of overlap, I think, too. So some of the stuff in the book really stands out around this implementation model. I told myself to talk about what was on page 169, so I'm thinking about the things that are mentioned there in terms of the sub bullets under each of those, and the way social proof and other elements become part of our story, I think will be evident too. But yeah, so I don't know anything else to say about that, Jess.
Mm-mm.
Just to show the model.
Yep.
And then we can go to the next slide, and we can begin with exploring. So I think for us in this phase, it was, the initial sort of recognition, that this is an area that we need to know more about. And then, I don't know, a bit of a search, I guess, for everything that we could find that would help us get to the bottom of this question about how we're teaching reading and what makes sense. For us, building leadership team knowledge and understanding. At the time, I was responsible just for our early and middle school principals. And so I had developed a pretty good relationship working with them. They already had actually some concerns about, reading recovery and some of the work that we were doing to address students that needed additional help and intervention in reading. And so they were kind of ready for a conversation about doing things differently, and they're all really committed to sort of doing their best for kids and their reading success. And so that was certainly part of our work. I think.
This was all done during the pandemic too.
I was just about to ask of timing
Oh,
of this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 2019-2020 school year is when we started asking some questions. And then as we went through the school year, March came around, and in March we had to, sorry, I've got a child appeared in my room. I got distracted there. Pandemic hit in March, and so it gave us a little bit of freedom, I guess, because we didn't have the regular things that came up in our work. Like certainly we were planning for learning at home, but um, our days were a little bit more free than they originally had been. And so that led us to have more time to explore, I think. And and so I remember doing the David Kilpatrick uh um there's a course that he had on there. And then we found out about the Haggerty curriculum. Some of you might still do the Haggerty curriculum. We're on all the Facebook groups, Science of Reading Facebook groups, trying to figure out what they were talking about, um, trying to see what resources were there. I think we talked with Linda Farrell, had time to meet with us virtually. I think she's from Readsters, and she has some affiliation with what is it, Reading Rockets, maybe.
Reading Rockets?
Yeah. Yeah, we talked to her, Valdine Bjornson, who's from Manitoba and an Orton Gillingham trainer. We did some work with her. We tried to do as much virtual training as possible. And I think some others in the Science of Reading community in Canada and the US, they had additional time too. So they had some time to meet with us virtually. Um, and um, and everyone was uh, really good to us, like donating their time and having conversations. Um, and then Scott, do you remember saying to me like, we should have somebody do some research on this. Like, we're going to do this new thing. We should have somebody research this.
Right. Yeah. This is how, yeah, that the way that things happen in our school division is sometimes I just am randomly in a rant about something, and then I might be half joking about it, but then the next day Jessica says, "Hey, I called three people from universities who might be researchers and might be interested in this." I was like, I don't know how serious I was about that, but there we go. And then we had somebody. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that point about the pandemic is a super important one. I think I saw, well, I know Lisa is on this call, and I think I saw Steve from Near North, and I know they commented, not to call them out, but I know they commented that that was really a time where their one of their speech paths, the wonderful Kara Macy, was able to really dig in and do a lot with that shift of, still a busy time, still a lot on the go, and still certainly, a contextually a challenging time, but just that interruption of the regular routine sort of gave that opportunity
Mhm.
for
Well, and
shifting
we
practice.
were home in the
Yeah,
evenings, right? We were
exactly,
home on the
right?
evenings and weekends. We couldn't do hockey practice. We couldn't like go on family holidays. Like we were stuck in our homes. And so we did nothing but
Work.
listen to Sold a Story and text it to our friends and like listen to this and let's have a Teams call later to
Yeah.
talk about
At that,
it.
yeah, at that time it was like the APM reports that came before Sold a
Mhm.
Story, I think, where like I was getting those sent to me from Jess and from our SLP Brittany. I think this was a period really where I'd say like the clinicians really got on board. Like Jess really got them fired up to be just like madly digging into all this research. We're really lucky. Our
The
team,
clinicians, we have two, just
yeah,
for context.
yes,
And
this is
can
a
you
Because
describe
sizable
that's
what
not
that
division.
familiar.
can you describe what that clinician role is? Because that's a word we don't use here. So what does a clinician, what would what would a clinician do every day at work?
Yeah, so we hire like our speech language pathologist. She works with speech and language disorders, and so she has background in language and literacy, and
And then our ed
uh,
psych,
yeah,
our
and
school
our ed
psychologist.
psych, yeah.
Yeah.
So we hire them on teacher contracts here. I don't know how it works in Ontario.
And
Well,
actually, one other comment that just came into the chat, Laura's former principal said if Laura Bross were here, she would agree. And exactly, she would agree because this was exactly when and how she started her journey too, was
oh,
pandemic. So,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was just madness, like just learning and trying new things and sharing podcasts and referencing books. And I think this was really a learning part. And then once that team was on board, I should say too that when in hiring Jess to be our learning coordinator, I can't remember what you were called at first, a student services
Student
consultant.
services consultant.
Part of the aim was actually, so when I said clinicians, that's typically about student services or the world of kids with exceptional needs or complex needs. And then curriculum, separate, distinct world where tier one instruction would live. We had like a concept of RTI already kind of at work in our schools, but part of what Jess was brought on to do, and specifically because it's her, um, was to bridge those two, what are sometimes distinct silos, right? The student services world or the clinician world or the curriculum and instruction world. And so this was really the opportunity to do that, where we had, yeah, everyone was digging in to learning about all of this. And yeah, that exploring was that time. And I guess, right, lucky for I mean, I'm experiencing PTSD around remote learning right now with the technology, but otherwise, this was a great gift of the pandemic to have had this opportunity to dig so deep into these. So yeah, so that was the time when the clinicians really got on board. As I said, we started talking to principals, and really our early middle principals were up for it. They were a little skeptical. I think actually, in fairness, like in truth, because sometimes those that are not clinicians, um, I think this is true, probably like classroom teachers, maybe like it's a challenge to hear from someone that's not been a classroom teacher about with expertise about something that you hold so dear. And so that was a bit of a challenge for our principals too, because for the first time we had clinicians as part of those conversations with principals, and they were not used to that. So there was, there was some work to do around that. And but this, like, everybody sort of started getting on board at that level of the level of our principals and our division staff to dig in and learn more and more. So that's exploring. Is there more exploring, Jess?
Well, I guess just the exploring that we've done more recently is around the cognitive science,
Mm-hmm.
um, and um, and just like instructional practices, like general instructional practices, like retrieval practices, like interleaving, space practice, um, those like instructional models, I guess,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for K to 12 and how we're going to teach content.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is too early in the ease, but like something that kind of went along with finding the researcher that helped us, and her name's Jean Sinclair. She works at Memorial University. Just found her after I just was making flippant comments. Um, but but she was helpful to us around the many things, but including establishing a scope and sequence. So our principals had a preferred way of kind of thinking about, like, when we started exploring, like, how will we start to move forward, and their kind of preferred default way of thinking about change and compelling change at the classroom level has really been about, like, establishing what the target is or what the end is like laying out what it is that everyone's going to kind of be on the hook for, and then it's like some of the rest will follow. And so it became important for us to have that scope and sequence, and we also started to forecast the demise of, well, I should say, I mean, in our school division, the demise of reading recovery. So we started to know that we were going to probably part ways with that practice. And, so starting to prepare for that and thinking about making sure that we were going to have something to take its place. And so the development of something that would take its place, I think, started to hatch around that time too. It's like,
And
what
you're
else
you're
could we do?
probably moving into the next one, which is
Exploring, yeah, okay.
Can I
experimenting.
interrupt with one really
Yeah,
good question right now,
right. Yeah.
before I jump you forward? Becky wants to know if you're finding yourself going through multiple like mini cycles, cycling through those 4 E's as you go through. So some smaller pieces, right? Like it seems, how does that work in terms of like it? Certainly, there's really, really big work at play, but do you find is it all at that scale, or are there little smaller units?
Yeah, I think they're deliberate about making it linear in the book,
Hmm.
but, but I think there are these loops for sure on different things because like, this is, I think, I don't know how people describe this that are smarter than me about implementation change, but it's like what you end up finding out is that like there's a group of us that became much further ahead in our learning and understanding and what we wanted to start seeing, right? And the members of that group either have to remind themselves, remind one another, or be reminded that the new people you're talking to about it they didn't get that APM reports email. They didn't hear that podcast and all that stuff. So you do need to loop back.
Like
So
the curse of
yeah.
knowledge, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing, right? Where it's like you start to get so excited and you get momentum at one level, and then all of a sudden it's like you brought another group in or another handful of people, or maybe all of your teachers. And it's like, wait a second, we're not where you are. Like, hold on, right? So you get a
I even
reminder
think
that,
of that, there's that diffusion of innovation curve. That's like a normal, it's like a normal bell shape. And it shows like, and I'm not going to remember the words correctly, the exact labels, but the innovators in in that smaller little tail, and then the early adopters, the
right.
general public, and then just recognizing that of how that diffuses across the system depends on the person. It depends, that
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
all universal all at once.
Yeah, and I
yeah,
think
totally.
someone was saying in their school with many staff, there's
Yeah,
staff is at different points
Yep.
in the trajectory, and like we have that too. We have certain staff that are on different parts of the
yeah,
trajectory and different schools that are on different parts
yes,
too, right? So all of a sudden we'll have we think, okay, this school's like they've really like I don't know, you don't want to say in the lead, but like this school is kind of doing things in a different way than the other schools. And then it could be 3 months later, and then all of a sudden something happens at another school, and you're like, holy smokes, the teaching there is starting to look really good. And yeah, it's just kind of interesting, like to think about what was it that made a big difference at that school, or for that teacher. It's like all of a sudden a teacher gets hooked for a certain reason. Like we had, I think some of the people who were the quickest to take on or really start believing in structured literacy are the people who had young kids at the time, or kids that were just starting to learn
right,
how to read. Um, they were like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense with what I'm seeing with my 4-year-old right now, or my 5-year-old.
right.
Or they have a family member that is dyslexic, or they themselves struggle to learn how to read, and what are the things that worked for me, um,
Hmm.
and some people had the also had the experience where I had trouble learning to read, um, and phonics didn't work for me. Like I remember being hammered with phonics in a special education setting, and like I still struggled. So that must not work. There must be something out there that's different that could have worked for me, right? So like our own stories kind of play into
Hmm.
how we adopt something.
Yeah,
Lots of good comments coming in the chat, right? About, fidelity of implementation, both in terms of screening and explicit instruction, seeming to be an important place to start. I'll read this one word for word. This is a long game, and we have to remind ourselves of this often. We want
Yeah.
the implementation to stick, and this is going to take time as we work with all educators across the system.
Hmm.
And then another point about the importance of collective efficacy, as well as educators starting to see the difference they are making, and that spreading throughout a staff. And that's certainly something that came up in this book, right? In terms of those
Yeah.
highlighting that. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad somebody mentioned collective efficacy because I was making a point of this somewhere the other day. It's just like like when in our context when we've been hearing a lot about collective efficacy, it actually seemed to leave out the part where you see the difference. It's like which is weird, but it's like that's totally true for us. It's like you actually get legit collective efficacy that comes out of the people's experience that like this is making a difference, right? All any teacher wants is to know that what they're doing is making a positive difference for kids. And then once the group can see like, hey, our work together is really paying off, then you really get
Well,
that feeling
and
like it's
and I think that kind of
momentum.
happened with your principal group. It's like once like a couple principals got on board and then
Mhm.
like motivated other principals, like their social network kind of
Yeah.
reinforced some of the ideas,
Right.
and then we've got a group of people who are just like nerding out on education in the evenings and weekends. We're all listening to the same podcasts and we discuss them over drinks on Friday after work, and it's like
Mhm.
people get excited about seeing something new happen in the school and seeing the kids learn. And I
Mhm.
think somebody said something about data, and that's been really true for us too, is
Yeah.
like our data has really reinforced um, that this is working.
Yeah.
And then that makes people pretty excited.
We should go to experimenting and then yeah, so we did have like our divisional team obviously, but then the principals. Our division's small, so I don't know to what extent we really went like the pilot route
Mhm.
at all. But for us, I mean, this I don't think larger systems, I don't know, could do this. And I don't say this to be flippant about our responsibility to be thoughtful about how we spend money on resources. But when I think about this time of experimenting, I think about how boxes and boxes of books like the Haggerty books or Foundations or whatever we're showing up. We're showing up at the division office. This stuff was showing up. It was like, what's going to be the resource that it makes this palatable for teachers? I don't
Mhm.
know if this is what people do. This probably isn't what systems do, but it's what we ended up doing is like, let's get a whole bunch of this stuff in here and try it and figure out like what are the pain points with each of these different kind of things. We did that with both PD and presenters, and we did it with resources. Just like it was like, let's bring in Kilpatrick and talk to all the teachers on a Zoom call. Let's have them all get Orton Gillingham training, all of which we did. I mean, we just went
You
bonkers
just,
on all this
yeah,
stuff. It was
like try it
pandemic
all.
time.
Yeah, or it's like Nancy's got a lot of street cred in her school. Bring her in and show her the 5 different things we bought and tell her like get her to tell us
Right,
which one's good
right, right.
or
So I mean,
which one's like gonna make other people want to do it.
yeah, so it was like all that stuff. It was just the time of like throwing a million things at the wall and seeing what would
Yeah.
stick to find out like what actually resonates with people. And so yeah, and I mean we did end up like UFly was really the thing that I think that was a major, major moment for us in the experimentation. And yeah, so uh, and I don't know, Jess, if you want to talk about that, but really it was like trying to apply learning that we'd had in the past about models of implementation or success with how teachers
Yeah.
learn.
Well, and I think there was like there's always some debate, right? Like which works better, like the grassroots initiative or the top down? And I think the grassroots stuff is a little bit more savory for people. Um, but the truth is in our story, it was both. Like we had to we developed our scope and sequence with Gene Sinclair's help. And then Scott said, everyone's got to do it. I don't care if you're using Foundations or Haggerty or Orton Gillingham or UFly, like use what you're going to use, but follow the scope and sequence and meet the benchmarks for your grade. Um, and that's not an easy thing to do, like declaring this will happen. So I think I was super appreciative that Scott was willing to just make a decision and tell people that, because it doesn't really make you a popular leader when you declare like you must. And then the really unpopular thing was using Dibbles as our universal screener.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, and
And just to clarify, there's no provincial mandate for screening. You are not required to do so.
Oh no, there's no provincial mandate for
I
anything.
just wanted to tee that up. Yep.
oh,
Yeah.
and like everyone was still
Yeah.
using like Fontes and Pinnell or PM benchmarks,
Yes.
and kind of figuring out if kids were at benchmark or at grade level according to those assessments. And so telling everybody like, you're going to take psychometric properties training today, and at the end
Yeah.
of it, we're going to tell you that in the fall you're all doing dibbles. Like that was super unpopular, and
I like how we've reached the point of the story where Jessica tells everyone how unpopular I am with everyone.
well, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Like
You gotta
it
shout
had
it. It's a
it
great
had
in
to
the chat.
happen. But
The
then I
chat's a
think,
great leadership move. So it's all good.
well, but then at the same time, it's like you can't just tell people to do something and then not give them support and resources in
Resources,
how to do
yes.
it, right? So
Yes.
when UFly came out, we had a literacy consultant who had worked in, I think, 6 out of the 8 schools over her career, and really got into structured literacy right at the outset. And she had a lot of connections with a lot of different teachers. And so she would tap somebody on the shoulder and say, like, hey, there's this new thing called UFly. I haven't taught it before, but I want to learn more about it. Do you mind if I come and try it out in your class and kind of show you a little bit about it? And then once she got into a couple classrooms, teachers were like, what a relief, because like I've been trying to throw together these Orton Gillingham lessons and I don't really know what I'm doing. And like the script was helpful to people, right?
Mhm.
Like UFly is
Mhm.
an educative curricula. And once people saw that UFly does all the things that you have to do in the scope and sequence, they were like, okay, what a relief. Like now I don't have to spend 2 hours a night figuring out how I'm going to do my structured literacy lesson tomorrow. And
Yeah.
so our literacy consultant was super helpful in like building the social networks, um, and networks of support in the schools and making it something that didn't seem so scary.
Yeah. When we came to the screener, Dibbles too, like my approach with the principals is mostly this is what actually happened. And we were on a Zoom call with them to say, okay, we all know that this is going to happen. We're going to set the date, like everyone must do it by when. So you tell me, like I go back to my principals to say like how far and how fast can we push, without mutiny, right? It's like tell me how, like you have to tell me if it's going to be too much. And we did actually have one principal say like, because we were going to do it in the spring, whatever year it was, 2 years ago or whatever it was, like, okay, our baseline's going to be spring of whatever or June of whatever, and it was like we had one of 5 principals say like this is not going to go well if it's now instead of fall. And so I said, okay, we'll wait. We'll do it in the fall. If that's going to be the difference, if that's going to be the thing that helps make sure that people feel safe doing it, we'll wait and we'll do it in the fall. But it wasn't negotiable whether we were going to do it. There was some flexibility given to the how, and there's some flexibility given to the when. But then it was just time, and we had to do it. And then once you start having results, to the points earlier about data and so on, then now we're in it, right? Like now we can see the evidence. Like we better figure this out. We better figure this out because we're on the hook, and we want to make sure that we're doing the best by our kids, right? So yeah.
Would you say this would be expanding?
Yeah, I think we're probably expanding now. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
I
and
think, yeah, go ahead.
there was this joke for a long time that was like, because like it wasn't a very popular move with all of our K-3 teachers, and some of them were like, um, and they'll tell you this now, like I was going to die on that hill. Like there
Mm.
was nothing you were gonna do or say to convince me, like no amount of PD, no person that was gonna convince me to start doing structured literacy or like buy into it. Like I was doing it, but I wasn't buying into it. Um, and so there was always the principals would tease me like about sending the big white van that was going to come and steal all their books over the weekend, um and there would be no more leveled books in the schools when the teachers came back after spring break or Christmas holidays or whatever. Um, do you remember this, Scott?
What was, say it again? Sorry.
It's like the big white van that was going to come and steal
Oh
all your
yeah, that's right. We're
leveled
gonna
books.
steal all your books. Yeah, especially if they're authentic. Yeah, yeah,
And and then it at one point it became a reality.
yeah. Well, I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking de-implementation. It's like once we did get to the point where we were further along, and I guess in expanding, and had some good examples and scaling up. We reached a, I think, I don't know how this went, but I think, um, you know, practice had changed enough that we still had like all the pattern books and all that stuff, right? People were saying we're going to need to move on from this. And it was like, you tell me how, like, we'll spend a gazillion dollars buying decodables when you're ready. But you just tell me how many you need to get all of these things done and to get all of whatever we're doing right now replaced to catch up with our practice. But and so we this was another, we had all these boxes and boxes of things arrive. Actually, we had people driving down to the border to bring them back. It's a whole other story, but which we couldn't do now probably, but I'll leave that. And uh, and it was like, okay, you can come and pick up your new nice books, or they can be distributed to you, but only if you send in the other ones.
Yeah.
It's like it's a trade at this point. It's like you're not getting the new ones unless you de-implement your old ones or whatever. So that was a bit of our de-implementation story, I think, around like the readers and the text that we were using.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of it too.
Yeah. De-implementing reading recovery went in there.
Yeah,
So it's like we
yeah.
wanted to keep the model for reading recovery, which was like um really good mentorship and PD opportunities, and people sharing their lessons and getting feedback on how their lessons were going. So we wanted to get rid of the content that was in reading recovery, but use kind of a similar structure. So um, so we did that. We replaced it with structured literacy content, and now we have very rigorous tier 3 interventions, and intervention teachers who have really clear, direct and explicit lessons that they deliver to
Hmm.
students, and then that's overseen by or supported by our speech language pathologist.
Hmm.
And then just some other stories like we had a principal who implemented a walk to read model in his school, and just told teachers like you're going to have this group and you're going to have this group for the next 6 weeks and we're doing it, and I just need you to trust me that it's going to work. And I think the grade 1 teachers by November they were getting really scared because usually in grade 1 by November, kids would be reading books, and they were seeing by November that kids were just still blending letters together and not really reading whole paragraphs. So they were starting to get really worried. And then I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, things really clicked for the students in their class, and their reading just took off at like an exponential rate. Um, and so I talked with that teacher. We went to New Orleans for the Plain Talk conference in February, and I said, um, like, would there have been like if we could have done it differently, like 3 years ago? Is there somebody that I could have introduced you to, something you could have read that would have that would have got you on board earlier?
Right.
And she said, honestly, Jessica, like, uh, I just needed the principal to tell me that I had to do it. It's like I would not have believed it unless I had been made to do it. And she
Yeah.
said, and now I am like hook, line, and sinker, a believer in this. And I know that this is the best thing that we can do for kids. Um, so
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes like a gentle push into having to do it and then
Yeah.
seeing the results
Results.
from it,
Yeah.
is the thing that needs to happen. And it's a yucky process, right? Like nobody likes being told what to do in their classroom, especially when you're a teacher that has a lot of experience. And it's like I get defensive when people tell me to change something,
Right.
um, and I'm not prepared to change it, or I really believe in the thing that I'm doing right now, and then somebody's asking me to do it differently. Like
Mhm.
that's not an easy thing to be asked to do. So it's like I think that our teachers are just like really incredible
Yeah.
for sticking with us through
Yeah.
some pretty tough times.
I think the
And a point in
embedding.
the chat. Oops, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. I was
Oh,
just I was moving on to embedding because I feel like
yes.
we're
I
taking
was
too
going to
much
say,
on that.
in the interest of time, I'll move you to embedding, but I do want to call out that point about de-implementation. Steve brings up that his experience is that they had to give that permission to de-implement over and over and over again, right? Really making
Yeah.
that really clear. But absolutely,
Yeah.
embedding, wrap us up.
Yeah.
How, what's happening now?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I think is a bit clear in what Jessica just said, and it's like joke kidding aside about how whatever unpopular became or whatever, or like telling people what to do, is like another thing that we never really did, and this is still a question for me that I ask Jess, like, I don't know, probably once a month. It's like we never really had, or at least I feel like we didn't, I never did. It's like there was never really the meeting where you say to people like, here's this big explanation about, like, let me teach you all about like what balanced literacy is and what that is and what this other thing is, and here's the big rationale. We actually never really did that in a formal way. It was like these pieces all along that were kind of a nudge or an invitation, or back and forth between nudge and invitation. And then we were doing it, and now we're just doing it. But I think it's probably a question for sustainability, is to what extent, um, and people can take this away and think about it. It's like, and I'm sure smart people have written about it and researched it, but it's like, to what extent do you need to galvanize, like, um, your doing with your understanding? Like, I don't know, it's still a question for me that I think we have a bunch of teachers that, like, and this is not pejorative, it's like they didn't listen to the podcasts, sold a story, I don't know, like, I was never really sure what balanced literacy meant. I'm not really sure what this other thing is. Like, they're doing work, right? They're working their tails off every day. That's what they're doing, right? And it's like, and I don't know it's a question for me. How much does it matter that everyone is part of the, like, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's a question for me. And as we go forward with embedding, that's still a question, because I think we're trying to attach new things now to our reading experience. And so maybe in there somewhere we need to, like, tie that, those ends together for folks, or with folks, and so, that's part of it for us, I think. But I think we do feel like we're at an embedded level with the reading part, but it's like, what can we do with the other pieces?
Well, for
Yeah.
what it's worth. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, our education faculties aren't yet teaching structured literacy to
Mhm.
teachers. So one thing that Scott has done, and our board of trustees has been really supportive of, is hiring new grads in May and June. And then we do like really intensive training with them in May and June to get them ready. Like we call it evergreen ready because we expect a certain kind of teaching in our school division that is not expected in other school divisions. So the teachers that come and train with us in May and June feel really, really prepared for what we expect them to do in September.
That's a really important point about incoming. Yeah, that's a
Mhm.
huge point.
When we're really lucky because we've had a bunch. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, I don't know, like what would the percentage be? Just like 20% of our teachers are like new in the last handful of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And we've gotten to take them to the Plain Talk conference, to the DI conference in
Eugene?
Oregon,
Yeah.
um, Reading League.
yeah.
We've got a bunch of teachers coming to
Yeah.
Toronto in
Yes.
April.
So our teacher grads, Jessica may have said this, but I see some questions in the chat. They graduate at the end of April, and it's like I just hire them from May, like in May and June. They do some divisional supply teaching, and then we spend 10 days like training them. And it's like right now what we're doing is we're showing like step lab videos, reward, what's Writing Revolution, I mean, Writing Revolution, those teacher walkthroughs, those books. It's like um this orientation towards science of learning material and way of doing things.
Yeah,
So
Incredible.
it's kind of like a university course.
yeah,
They're given homework to take home,
yeah,
and who leads that? Our literacy and
yeah,
numeracy facilitator
yeah,
plans and organizes and delivers that training.
yeah. The one that did the residencies too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm really like lots of the things I said about all the books we bought and sending people all this PD and hiring people in May. And I was like, it sounds pretty luxurious. I've got a board that's very supportive. One great thing about Manitoba is our boards still can do local taxation. So like I'm in a school division that has resources to invest, and we're of a size that we can make an investment and have it pay off in a short amount of time. I
Well,
know we're
it's
probably
also
over
about
time here.
prioritizing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like your funding the things that
mhm,
we think are the most important. So the funding goes to the things that are the most impactful.
yeah,
Like we had to fund full-time kindergarten so that we can follow the scope and sequence and do more intervention at an earlier age. So I know in Ontario you have full-time kinder, but we're only funded for half-time kinder in Manitoba. So Scott made the decision to fund kinder in our school division at 100%. So not all kids in Manitoba get to come to school in kindergarten every day, but ours do.
You've
yeah,
got a really active chat. I think a lot of people who are super appreciative. Yeah, funding aligned with impact, brilliant. A lot of people who are really appreciative for, obviously you coming and sharing your journey, obviously sharing it, but then also the work that you're doing for the students who you serve. I am keeping an eye on our time. If there are
yeah.
any last lingering questions right now, I hope you have the chat open. You're just getting a lot of love, so I hope you can have that open.
I can see it. Yeah,
Okay, good. Okay, good. So if there's any last lingering questions for this crew, please put them in the chat. But I think I'm just so appreciative. You've answered all my questions. I made a list before of things I wanted to make sure I asked you, but I think especially that model with the new hires in May and June is a really, really interesting one.
yeah. I just don't want too many people to know about it, so because they'll scoop me.
It's fine. I feel like this is the
So
end of the
nobody,
recording.
don't
Nobody's
tell
going to make it
anyone
this
else in
far.
Manitoba.
But
Just in Ontario
tell all
only.
your Ontario new
Yeah.
grads to apply. We have positions open for next year. So
Yeah,
put the
yeah,
word out. We're looking for
Sounds like a
teachers.
great place to work. Sounds like a great
yeah,
place to work.
yeah. Adrian's in. Adrienne is in.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah. New hires. Yeah. But
Yeah,
I think also to Mike's point, really, I mean, I hope this is something where I think about districts that are doing really great work. And I hope there is backwards pressure on those faculties of education of sort of saying, these are the grads who we're really looking for. And these are the grads who are fit for purpose and fit for working in our district. And this is what we need to do to make sure that happens, right? Because that's something we're ultimately, goodness gracious, we got to get that to shift for sure, right? Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's true.
that's for sure. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I am so glad that Scott and
Hey,
Jessica
there's Laura.
joined. Oh, yeah. Laura's there. Okay, Laura says,
Yay.
thank you, everyone. I gotta make sure this doesn't scroll. I just got to hear the last bit. Excited to listen to the recording and take it all in. Yeah, Laura says that's her tagline. Let's create joy by harnessing the science of learning together. So
Yeah.
with that, I think that's a great way to close out. Thank you so much to everybody for joining. Thanks, Scott and Jessica. We appreciate you so much. And Laura, we're sending you good healing vibes and looking forward to
Yes.
seeing you back on April whatever the last day is. I should have it off the top of my mind. At some point in April for our final session, Nathaniel Swain will be joining us and it'll be great. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thanks so much.